Hello and welcome to the third tutorial on making space rocks with drag and drop in GameMaker. This time we're doing attacks and collisions. Now in our game we're going to have two collision cases. So one is the player colliding with the asteroids and the other is the player's bullet colliding with the asteroids. We haven't made the bullets yet, so let's concentrate on the first one. So in GameMaker, the way our standard collisions work is that one object checks if its collision mask or bounding box is overlapping with that of another. And this collision mask is something that we set up in the sprite of the object. So let's come over to the ship sprite. So over here is the collision mask. And by default, it's going to be set to a rectangle that covers the entire sprite. But there are some other options. So we can set it to be an ellipse or a diamond, and we can also set the mode to be manual so that we can control the dimensions of the mask. And we can also make it precise collisions, which basically means the collisions will be pixel perfect, so they'll check for each pixel individually. And you might be wondering, why don't we just make everything precise? Why are there even options for rectangles and ellipses? Well, collisions tend to be among the more costly computations to make in game development. Admittedly, modern computers are extremely fast, and you're only going to get serious performance issues if you have several hundred collision checks or more, but it's better practice to opt for efficiency when we can. And rectangular collision checks are much more simple computations to make than checking a circle, and certainly more than checking every single pixel, which is what a precise collision check does. So let's just make shapes that approximate the shape of our sprites. So for the ship object, we could just do a diamond. And we can make the mode manual and then distort this shape so that it matches the ship sprite. So generally speaking, even if the hitbox doesn't cover the entire sprite, especially if it's the player's sprite, they aren't really going to mind if the tips of the sprite don't cause a collision because it kind of works in their favor. But what will feel unfair is if you have a rectangle and the very outsides of the sprite cause a collision where the player saw that it clearly didn't. But this often comes out in playtesting, so feel free to have a look at some of the different shapes and do what feels good for you. So we've set the ship's collision mask. Let's go ahead and do the asteroids. So for these, I think a pretty good shape for them is going to be an ellipse. And I might actually just keep that at automatic, but you can fit it a little bit better if you want. Alright, and now let's actually program the collision event. And this is where we should consider one more thing. Should I have the asteroid objects checking for a collision with the player object, or should I have the player check for a collision with the asteroids? Well, like I said before, collision checks can be costly, so we should go with the option that will result in the fewest number of collision checks. So since there could be tens of asteroids in the room at any one time, but just one player object, it's going to be more efficient for one player to check for a collision with multiple asteroids. And the same is going to go with the bullets when we get to those. So let's come over to the ship. And there is a few ways we could do this. So there are collision blocks that we could use right here in the step event, but there is also a dedicated collision event that is triggered by a collision with an object. So let's go add event, collision with the asteroid. So now, what do we want the player to do once we've collided? Later on, we'll probably be doing stuff like deducting lives and perhaps the score, but for now, I'm just going to make the player destroy itself. So I'm just going to type this into the search, destroy, and right here, we have destroy instance. There we go, so that's all we need. Let's run the game and see how that looks. There we go, so the player object deleted itself once it collided with the asteroid. Now let's do the bullets. So for this, we're going to need a bullet sprite. So let's come over and create a new sprite. So SPR, bullet, and I'm just going to make this pretty small, so 2x2. And I'll just color it all white. And the collision mask for this will just be the whole thing, so we can leave it at the default. And we'll put the origin in the middle center. And let's go ahead and make the object for the bullet. OBJ bullet. And we'll set its sprite index to the bullet. Alright, so firstly we need to do the logic for creating this bullet. And that is going to be done by the ship. So let's come to the ship and we'll add a key press. And I think I'll use the spacebar this time. But we're not going to use key down like we have been using. We're going to use a key press because we only want to create one bullet at a time just when the player presses the spacebar. Alright, so again, let's just use this search right here and type create. And right here is create instance. So let's drag this in so that we are creating an instance when we press the spacebar. Alright, so the object that we're creating is the bullet. The location is going to be wherever the player is. So now we just want it to be right at the player's X and Y relative to wherever it is in the room. So we'll just tick relative. And if we wanted to offset the bullet, then we would be changing these, but we want it right where the player is. We do want it to be created in the instances layer because that was the layer in the room where we're putting all of our instances. And now, not only do we want to create the bullet, but we also want the bullet to shoot off in the direction that we're facing. So we need to get access to the bullet and change its direction to match the image rotation or the image angle of the player. And now, so that we can get access to the bullet that we just created, we can save its ID into this target. So whatever we put here, so let's say new bullet, it's going to create a new variable for this object to remember, and it's going to save the value of the unique ID for this particular bullet object. And now I can use this to change the value of not my variable, but new bullet's direction. So instead of just typing direction, if we put new bullet and then a dot, this is going to access the new bullet's direction. So not the ship's, it's going to be the new bullet's. And then we can change it to match the ship's image angle. And finally, one other thing that I want us to consider is this temporary tick here. And we can tick it basically if we don't have any more need for that ID after this. And that's true. We don't need to remember this anymore, so we can tick temporary. We only needed to remember what it was so that we could get access to the new bullet's direction. So now the bullet will be going the right way, but we also need to set its speed to actually have it moving. So let's come into the bullet, add the create event. There we go. So we can just set its speed, and maybe I'll set it to be 6 so that it's going a bit faster. All right. So now if we run the game and we press the shoot, we should get a bullet being created. There we go. All right, now let's do the collision event with the asteroids. So we can add an event, just like with the player, collision, asteroid. So we want a few things to happen in this event. So firstly, we want the bullet to destroy itself. So that's easy. Let's do that. Let's just drag in destroy instance. And now we also need to get access to the asteroid that we're colliding with and have it destroy itself, and also create 2 more asteroids. So what we can do is use apply to right here, and then any more blocks that we drag into here, we can get something else to run it. So not the bullet, but we can say other. And in this case, other means the other object in the collision. So not the bullet, but the asteroid. And now when I say destroy here, it is the other instance that will be destroying itself, not the bullet. So be very careful of what you put connected to this apply to. Alright, so after the object destroys itself, then if it's a huge asteroid, then we want it to make 2 more smaller medium asteroids. And if it's a medium asteroid, we want it to make 2 smaller ones. And if it's a small one, we might just have it explode with some debris. So firstly, we need to actually check what kind of asteroid that we're dealing with is. So we have to check what its sprite index is. So we can say if variable, and the variable that we're checking is the sprite index, is equal to the huge asteroid. So if this is true, then we want to create a new instance. So I'll put it there. And the instance that we want to create is an asteroid. And now again, we want to make sure that this asteroid, its sprite index is a medium asteroid. Because remember, at the moment, we're just having asteroids randomly select what their sprite index is going to be. So this create event is going to run immediately after it gets created. Right? So immediately after this block happens, we have an opportunity to overwrite what it was just set to. So just like before, we're going to save this in a temporary variable so that we can have access to the asteroid. And we want to just tick relative. And we're going to change new asteroid dot sprite index to be the medium asteroid. But actually, we wanted to create 2, didn't we? So we could copy and paste this and have it perform this twice. But another thing we can do is use a repeat loop. So this will repeat an action however many times you want. So now it will be repeating this action twice. And then we'll just chain that onto here. All right, so now we want another case. So if it's not huge, then we might check if it's medium. So what we could actually do is just copy this entire thing, paste it here. It's come up in the wrong place. Let's just drag this over to this. So it's performing it in the right order. But now we want to check if the sprite index is medium. And we want to set the index to small. And now finally, for the last one, for if the sprite index is equal to the small sprite, I might do something a little bit sneaky. And no matter what the sprite index is, so if it's huge, medium, or small, in all cases, I'm actually going to create some debris. So we haven't made the debris yet. So let's go ahead and create a sprite. And I'm going to make this even smaller than the bullet and have it just be 1 by 1. And I'll just color that white. All right, and I'll make the object for it and we'll set its sprite index. Alright, so now it should come up if we try to change it in the bullet. So, and we're not going to wrap this in an if because we want to do it in any case. So we'll just say create an instance. And that's going to be the debris. We'll tick relative again. We don't need to save the ID, but we do want to create 10 of these. So let's put in another loop. And we'll repeat this 10 times because the debris are pretty small and we want it to be a bit of an explosion. So now I'm going to have the debris, all of these choose a random direction to shoot off in and then fade away over time so that we can't see them anymore. So in its create event, we will choose a direction. So we want a random number again. Set a random number, integer from 0 to 359. And the variable that we're changing is the direction. All right, and let's also set its speed just to 1. And now in the step event, I'm going to have it reduce its transparency so that it looks like it's fading away. And we can reference an instance variable that all instances have. And this one is called image alpha. And the alpha of the image is kind of like its transparency. And this goes between a value of 1 and 0. So 1 is fully opaque, so it'll be a completely full white square. And then as it reduces down to 0, it's going to fade to become fully transparent. So every frame of the game, I want to reduce this image alpha relative to what it currently is. So let's choose a small number for it to decrease. So we'll just take away 0.01 every frame. And then once it is invisible, it's still going to exist in the game, but we don't need it to be. So we can have it check if image alpha hits 0, and I could say equal, but generally just to cover cases where for some reason the 0 has been skipped and it continues down into the negatives. Maybe we have had some strange frame skip or something unexpected has affected the value. It's good practice to just say less or equal to so that it covers the case of 0 and anything below that. So if we hit that, then we want it to destroy itself. And I don't think we had the player make any debris when it crashes. It just got destroyed. So let's add the same event to the collision in the player. So let's just copy this and paste it here. All right, let's test that. There we go. So we're creating the explosion when we shoot the bullets. The debris is fading away, and the player also explodes when it hits an asteroid. Now, at this point, I want us to consider something. So whenever you're developing your project, you should consider where you can improve performance. And an important way we can do that is to ensure the objects on screen here are the only ones that exist. So far, we've gotten around our ship and asteroids going outside the room by having them wrap around it when they go outside the border, but we haven't done that for the bullets. So for these, when they go off screen, they still exist in the game, and they're still out there running code, making that collision check. And we don't need them to be doing that. Once they go off screen, they're never going to come back in the game. So we can add an outside room event in the bullets. So this is down in other, outside room, and that gets triggered whenever the bullet moves outside of the room. Then we can just say destroy itself. Alright, so our collisions are looking pretty good. In the next tutorial, we're going to be adding things like lives and the score, as well as setting up the different rooms in the game, like a start room, game over, and win screen. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next one.